Welcome to the Best of Our Knowledge, a program focused on education, learning, and research. On this episode, we'll speak with a survivor of the 2012 Sandy Hook school shooting about a 10th anniversary remembrance she recently organized. And we'll learn about an upcoming webinar series focused on addressing mental health in education. I'm your host, Lucas Willard. It's all next on the Best of Our Knowledge. This is the Best of Our Knowledge. I'm Lucas Willard. This December marked the 10th anniversary of the Sandy Hook Elementary School shooting in Newtown, Connecticut, where 26 people were killed, including 20 young children. Katie Bisset, a survivor of the shooting, was 8 at the time. She's now a first-year student at Siena College in Loudonville, New York. Bisset worked with the private school to organize a remembrance service. She told me the event took inspiration from an annual remembrance at her hometown church in Connecticut.
Back home at my home parish at St. Rose, we have these remembrance masses every single year. And that became a huge tradition within my family and within my community to kind of remember and be part of the healing process. So over the years, and we kept doing that and we kept going to them. And it became my favorite Mass of the entire year, next to the Christmas Mass. But it became my favorite Mass of the entire year. And then when I went to Siena, I didn't have that anymore. I didn't have that connection to home. And I needed it. I needed that as part of my healing to kind of move on and grow. So I approached Father Larry about doing a remembrance Mass. And I didn't expect it to become like this big thing, but it did. I was just thinking, I would go to the grotto, I would read the names, the bells would be rung, that would be it. But he kind of said, what do you want to do? How do you want to do this? How do you want to remember? And we kind of developed it into literally a whole Mass, a whole service dedicated to it. And it meant a lot to me to have that kind of level of support 10 years later, especially miles from home. So when he asked what I wanted to do, one of the most important things that we do every year at the Mass at my home church was we bring up these angel ornaments, 26 angel ornaments that represent the 26 lives that died 10 years ago. And the names are read, and a youth from the community, brings up the angels and hangs an angel on a Christmas tree. And so I asked Father Larry if that would be possible, and he said absolutely. And he actually had his assistant decorate these really pretty handmade ornaments with gold and silver, and they looked like angels, and they had the names written on the bottom. And so at the beginning of the service, this was all held in the grotto. And I really wanted it in the grotto because the grotto is one of the most beautiful places on campus. And I feel like it represents kind of peace and most of all remembrance. So that's where I wanted to hold this. At the beginning of the Mass, I read the names, and my dad and my parents actually came up, and my dad rung the bell of remembrance in the grotto. So after each name was read, the bell was rung, and then somebody who was standing in the service would take an angel and hang it up on the tree. And it was the most perfect thing ever. The snow was falling. It was on this newly fallen covered tree and snow. And a lot of the people there were a majority of my friends out of support. And I have only known these people for 3 months. And the outreach of support and love that came from my little community in Siena meant a lot to me. And I kept telling my friends and all the people there, like, thank you so much. This means so much to me. Like, you are such a huge part of the angels' lives and my life. Like, this is a huge part of a memory that I will never forget from my first semester.
Have you ever organized any other kind of event like this?
Not at Siena, no. This was kind of like my first real event. And it was obviously, I shouldn't be having it. I shouldn't have had to hold that ceremony, that Mass. But I kind of like took the reins on this, and I was like, not just as a part of like my personal healing and my personal like growth, I wanted to bring the remembrance to other people outside of Connecticut. And for the first time ever, I met one of my friends who I didn't know about Sandy Hook, who didn't know about it or what had happened, and that was a huge kind of experience for me. I was like, wow, there are people who don't know what happened. So I wanted to bring that aspect of remembrance to Siena.
You were in third grade at the time of the incident.
Yes, I was in third grade. I was 8 years old.
So there are people who are in high school and will soon be entering college who were even younger. I reflect on that similarly. When 9/11 happened, I was going into high school. It was my second day of high school. My sister, who's now a senior in college, was less than a year old at the time. And so she has no memory of that time. It's an unusual feeling. It must feel kind of strange to you.
It is. It's definitely strange because like I remember asking her, she like came into my room and I had to have been talking about it with my friends. She was like, "What are you guys talking about?" And I said, "Oh, well, I was 8 years old when the Sandy Hook shooting happened." And she was like, what are you talking about?" I was like, "You know, that shooting that happened in Sandy Hook about 10 years ago, 26 people died." And she had never heard of it. Like she was looking at me like I had three heads. And that kind of like took me back because I feel everywhere that I've been for the past 10 years, airports, grocery stores, and they take like my parents' license or they ask for my ID. They say like, "Oh wow, you're from Sandy Hook." I had never experienced somebody who was like, like I don't know what that is. And then when you tell them the story, you tell them what happened, what you had been through, it's like a completely different eye-opening experience. They're like, "Oh my God, like wow." Um, yeah.
The event is now 10 years ago. How are you processing it? And when you go through these remembrances, do you experience other emotions that you hadn't before?
Yeah. For the first time in 10 years, I experienced this yesterday. I wasn't severely upset. I wasn't sad. I didn't feel an immense amount of emotion or pain. I don't know if it was like 10 years and it was like, wow, it's been 10 years. But of course, when I went to the Remembrance Mass, I was standing there, and there's always this one song that they sing in church that gets me every single time. And it's called Eagle's Wings. And the mascot of Sandy Hook just happens to be an eagle. And that song gets me every single time. I always cry. But this past year, it's once you go through the motions, it almost becomes routine. You wake up on the day, you're like, all right, today is today. And I almost grieve more days before or days after because it's the feeling of like, it's coming, it's here, it's past, and now it's just going to be another year. It's just going to be another year. And it's really, really hard around this time of year because it's Christmas. It's the Christmas season, and you're thinking about those 20 little kids who should be opening up presents and be in their junior year of high school, which is just wild to me. Making friends and going to football games. But every year around this time when it approaches, um, it's a time to kind of be with my family and be with my community. When I realized this year that there was a chance that I could not come home because of finals, I was like, there's no way I can't not be home. Like I have to be home. And that's the thing, like, even though I wasn't severely affected this year, I knew that if I was in my dorm room right now, I would not be okay.
So you left campus to head home just a couple of days before the end of the semester.
Yes. So my professor actually, I approached him. My one final happened to fall yesterday. So I told my professor and I said, "Professor, I'm not going to be able to take this final." And he said, "No problem. Don't even worry about it. We will reschedule like don't even worry about it. And I took the final early so that I could come home. And that was something that was really, really huge for me because thinking about Sandy Hook and, you know, some people will think it's like an excuse to get out of a final, and it's not. But I was really scared about people thinking of me differently and using it as like a crutch for getting out of tests and that kind of thing. I was really scared about that, but I realized over time that this is a piece of me that isn't just going to go away. Um, and so I was very, very fortunate and very lucky to be able to come home. And every year or every so often when there's another shooting, specifically when Uvalde happened in Texas, I was crushed. I was crushed. I did not take that well at all. It was almost like a relapse. Like I did not take that well at all. Because the story is so similar. So similar, it's scary. It happened in an elementary school the same way. And I just thought about like those kids, there is probably a little girl in there or a little boy my age who doesn't know what is going on, who is scared and confused and does not know what the next 10 years of their life is going to be. Um, so whenever those shootings kind of happen, I get a lot of outreach from my friends and my family and people that care about me asking if I'm okay because it's there's stories of shootings that are just so similar. And it's especially ones that happen in schools and with the young kids, especially that hit me the hardest.
There have been so many people in the wake of these shootings. There's the Sandy Hook Promise that was started soon after the incident. Have you become active in campaigning for any issues related to these shooting incidents?
Yeah, so Sandy Hook Promise and is something super close to my heart. I actually joined the Junior Newtown Action Alliance at my high school my freshman year because I was of the age old enough to kind of like grasp this and be like, okay, I am 14 now. I'm gonna be an adult legally in 4 years. Why don't I take this big step and try and make a change? So I joined Newtown Junior Newtown Action Alliance at my high school, and it was just like a group of people, a group of students who were in my age range fighting for change. And that was something that was super, super special for me and also part of the healing process because it's like this group of people who care so much about a topic and who have been there and who have gone through it. One of the directors of the club was Natalie Barden, who lost her little brother in the shooting. So to see that kind of like as your role model and to be in that club and that organization, it's very, very moving. And it's really, really inspiring too. I got involved with them, and really, whenever there's like a local petition or a rally or anything like that, anybody here will tell you that we get involved heavily, and we're loud and we make a noise.
Have you had the chance to meet up with any of your high school classmates? And do you feel a closeness with your friends and classmates that you think others not affected by the same level of tragedy may feel?
Absolutely. It is so tightly knit and bound by the community because we have experienced something so traumatic that we can do nothing else but hold on to each other. So I talk about at school, I talk about my friends from home all the time. I visited my sister at the University of Connecticut and my brother and some other friends at Providence College, and we do not shut up about each other. We love each other. For some reason, we just are so close and we love each other. Like we are such a tight-knit community, and we have a bond like literally none other. And all of my friends are like, why do you love each other so much? Like, why are you so obsessed with each other? And it's because we have this traumatic event that kind of bonds us all together. And the people, my friends that I'm friends with here, like, I could never ask for a better friendship, and a better group of friends. Like I can't compare that to something that I will make in college because this is something so close. And it's something so beautiful too. Just to like have like this group of people that are so close with one another.
What do you plan to do for a career? What are you studying for?
I'm currently studying environmental studies and political science with a political science minor. Um, yeah,
Did did the events of the Sandy Hook shooting shape your decision to move into political science?
absolutely. Absolutely. When I started getting involved in like activism more and Junior Newtown Action Alliance, Um, I really liked the idea of kind of fighting for change and making people, kind of creating laws and creating a stir, really. Fighting for change was something that I had really like liked the idea of. Um, so, oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Unfortunately, mass shooting incidents are continuing. Do you have any advice for somebody who is processing tragedy? Is there something in the process that you went through that you found particularly helpful?
Um, yeah, I think the most important thing that people can do who are healing is to, above everything, we have a saying here in Sandy Hook, and it's we are Sandy Hook, we choose love. Love and kindness conquers everything. My principal who died on Sandy Hook, her quote was, be kind to one another. It's really all that matters. And I carry that on my heart everywhere I go because kindness is something that is free, it's easy, and to be kind to other people is something that can just fix everything. For people who are going through a dark time, there are going to be a lot of people who are asking, who say, oh, I'm praying for you, or I'm so sorry that this happened to you. Unfortunately, we've reached a point in our country where prayers do not help. We don't want your prayers. We don't want your I'm sorries. We want change. So, with that, reach out to local organizations and um, clubs in your local school, in your town, wherever, who are fighting for change. Whether that's Sandy Hook Promise or March for Our Lives or Moms Against Guns, any of those organizations do a great job of making change.
Do you plan to continue organizing remembrance services at Siena and beyond?
Absolutely. I feel like the remembrance service was something so small, but it meant so much to me. And I want to do more kind of activism but especially remembrance services in the future. I kind of want to bring, the awareness of gun violence to Siena because it's not something that has been um, kind of noticed or brought up. And I think that's something that like kids are the change, like we're the future. So why not start at a college? We've already had our remembrance mass. It's only up from here.
Thanks for taking the time, Katie. I really appreciate it.
Of course. Thank you so much.
Katie Bisset is a survivor of the Sandy Hook school shooting and a first-year student at Siena College. You're listening to The Best of Our Knowledge. I'm Lucas Willard. The principal of Sandy Hook Elementary killed in the 2012 shooting was Dawn Lafferty Hochsprung. Formed in 2013 at Russell Sage College in Troy, New York, the Dawn Lafferty Hochsprung Center for the Promotion of Mental Health and School Safety is hosting a webinar series beginning January 25th, focused on bringing the community together to address the mental health needs of students. To learn more about the webinar and the mission of the center, I spoke with the center's director, Dr. Jerome Steele.
Here we had this horrific tragedy, but the impetus for that tragedy was a young man who basically had mental health issues, who then had also access to a gun. And so one of the things that we looked at was, here is this tragedy, but how could that have been prevented? And if there were enough resources available to people like Adam Lanza, would this have happened?
So the upcoming webinar, the Spring 2023 webinar, is the power of community solutions. Maybe you can explain what do you mean by community solutions?
So the idea behind the power of community solutions is the idea that schools cannot do it alone. Hospitals cannot do it alone. Social agencies cannot do it alone. There have to be partnerships among all of these groups. I was a school superintendent. We dealt with crises, but I can't tell you. I mean, I'm going back 10, 12 years ago. I can't tell you how many times I may have interacted with a hospital. Probably once or twice in my 17 years as a superintendent in a small district north of Albany. But now, the connections that we're making, not only with Albany Medical Center, but with Saratoga Hospital, is the idea that some of the work that they are doing can have a deep impact on what educators are doing, what school districts are doing, so that it is more of a community approach. A school district, they see children, 6.5 hours a day. But during those 6 hours, there's a lot of people that have eyes on children so that they can recognize, some of the issues that may be appearing or showing within these children. So this webinar series is looking at it from, what are the statistics? How do we frame this issue? One of the things that Dr. Barbara Ostroff from Albany Medical is one of our presenters, and she will present with Dr. Melissa Doyle in April. And she shared with me some statistics, compared to, let's say, 2016. So as compared to 2016, pre-pandemic, right, there's been a 30% increase in mental health inpatient visits, 153% increase in ED visits for suicide attempts. And that's between ages of 5 and 18. The statistics are very sobering. And I think the idea here is we want to ensure that people are talking, and hopefully that we can address some of those issues. That how do we bring people together? Here's the issue. Now it's time to come up with a community solution to bring people together across disciplines to really have a paradigm shift in how we address mental health and social emotional issues.
Dr. Steele, would you be able to give an example of what's being taught in the webinar series and how that might affect the day-to-day in a classroom?
Well, there's a number of things that, a number of our graduates of our doctoral program have spent some time looking at social emotional issues. They've looked at mindfulness. And one of our presenters, Dr. Ashina Baez, has been working in the whole area of mindfulness and working with school districts in upstate New York and in New York City to try to bring in and have teachers, even if it's 5 minutes of mindfulness where people can reflect on, taking time out and just thinking about who they are and what they're doing and take the stress away. And I think it's, some teachers may say, well, this is something additional that we have to do. Well, if you're dealing with students with mental health issues or social emotional issues, I think it would be better to deal with some of those issues up front, and then you may not have those issues down the road. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but, if you need food and shelter, and that's what you're lacking, how are you going to present when you come to school? But if you take care of those basic needs, And mental health is a basic needs from my perspective. And I think if we can bring in different aspects of mindfulness and some other strategies that teachers and administrators can use within their schools, then I think that those are some of the low-hanging fruit that we can do. And I don't think it takes a lot of effort to do that. Some people may argue with me with that, but I really think it's possible. And, 5-10 minutes a day. And I think that could help. It doesn't solve the whole problem. And that's why you need to bring a community approach to this.
So what's the future for this webinar series? Will it continue, and will there be different themes moving forward?
Yeah, originally this was supposed to be an in-person conference. I think COVID, RSV, the flu kind of limited. We had very few registrants, and people were responding to me, I can't find substitute teachers to come in. So when that happened, we transitioned. If you were to look at at the Dawn Lafferty Hawksprung website over the last 2 years, we've done a whole series of webinars which we are on our website, so anybody could go to them and take a look at them, review them, and they cover different issues on the pandemic and COVID and the impact on schools, to social emotional issues, and how that all fit together, and what are we doing moving forward. So after this series, I would like to have an in-person conference, but sometimes it's much easier to get people together in a webinar format, and we hope to get people from across New York State. But sometimes it's good to meet in person too. So I hope maybe in the fall of 23, we could follow up with some of the ideas that were discussed in this 5-part series and really bring some community agencies together, really to bring forth a comprehensive approach. But it's really, at least right now, to get people talking, to kind of see where the needs are, what is it that you can bring to the table, and then how do we really bring about a community solution to some of these issues.
Dr. Jerome Steele is director of the Dawn Lafferty Hawksprung Center at Russell Sage College in Troy, New York. The webinar series, Beyond the Horizon, The Power of Community Solutions, begins on January 25th, 2023. This has been The Best of Our Knowledge, a national production of WAMC Northeast Public Radio. Thanks to associate producer Jody Cowan. Our executive producer is Dr. Alan Shartalk. To hear past episodes, visit our flagship station's website, wamc.org. Until next time, I'm Lucas Willard.